The wind whispered through the trees, a silent symphony of nature. In a small village nestled between the mountains, lived an old man named Arjun. He was known for his silence. He never spoke unless necessary. Some thought he was strange, others thought he was wise. But no one truly understood the power he held within. One day, a young boy named Rohan, restless and full of questions, approached Arjun. "Why don't you speak much?" he asked. Arjun simply smiled and gestured for Rohan to sit beside him. The boy obeyed, expecting words of wisdom. But there were none. Instead, there was only silence. Minutes passed. The silence grew heavier. At first, Rohan fidgeted, uncomfortable with the stillness. But as time went on, he began to notice things: the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, the distant laughter of children. For the first time, he heard the world around him without distraction. Arjun finally spoke, his voice calm, measured. "Silence is not empty, my boy. It is full of answers." Rohan looked at him, puzzled. "But how can silence give answers?" he asked. Arjun smiled again, this time pointing to the setting sun. "Watch," he said. Rohan turned his gaze to the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple. The sight was mesmerizing. In that moment, he felt something he couldn't explain: peace. The silence allowed him to experience the beauty of the world without words clouding his mind. Days turned into weeks, and Rohan visited Arjun often. Each time, they would sit in silence, letting the world speak in its own way. Slowly, Rohan began to understand. He found himself listening more, observing more, speaking less. He realized that in silence, one could hear not just the world, but also oneself. One day, a heated argument broke out in the village. Neighbors shouted, voices rising with anger. Rohan stood among them, watching. Instead of adding to the noise, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and remained silent. Slowly, the shouting subsided. People turned to look at him, curious. "Why aren't you saying anything?" someone asked. Rohan opened his eyes and smiled. "Because sometimes, silence speaks louder than words." The crowd fell quiet, reflecting on his words. The conflict faded, replaced by understanding. Years passed. Rohan grew older, wiser. He carried the lesson of silence wherever he went. He listened before speaking, observed before acting. And just like Arjun, he too became known for his wisdom. But it wasn't his words that people remembered, it was his silence. For in silence lies the power to heal, to understand, and to truly listen. And that was the greatest lesson of all.